So it was just another reason to put the blame at black men's feet, is what it was. A lot of people want to blame us, and yet most of the issues she was moving on, like abortion, doesn't directly affect black men. Not directly. Now indirectly it does, but directly it don't. And she's not for black men, period, because of what she did when she was the
Prosecutor.
prosecutor in California. What makes you think we should even vote for this heifer? We shouldn't, but yet over 80% did. That just shows we are loyal to certain individuals to a fault. No, she never should have been as the Democratic representative. She never should have been. She didn't get voted in when she had a chance to run against Biden the first time. She wasn't good enough, and she's not good enough now to be a president. She hasn't shown any type of leadership ability when she had the opportunity. Her thing was the border. She did nothing for us. Homosexualism, only y'all women will accept that bullshit and that lifestyle because y'all hang with them motherfuckers. Y'all encourage them motherfuckers. Y'all befriend them motherfuckers. Men ain't befriending these gay men. Men ain't uplifting it and pushing this agenda. We're not pushing that shit, but women will, especially women of a color like us. They will push that bullshit. She's for it. She's okay if she could get the motherfuckers in jail to get a sex change. She's all right with that. She's all right with that if your kids do it. She's okay with that too. Nothing about this under my agenda. I would not vote for that. I'm against it. So if Trump's against it, I'm against it.
I do want to ask the women, because that is a question that I don't think that we are able to hear. And again, the goal of this conversation is to actually get some thoughts out and seeing if we can get somewhere with it, right? But as women, how do you guys feel about this whole gender thing? And just be honest. Like, does it bother you? Like, do you guys think that it's like disrupting families? What are your thoughts?
In regards to gender, I think that it's been a I don't want to say a distraction, but I definitely think it's more of a mental, psychological. For me, I don't fully understand it, so I don't want to speak too much on it. I don't necessarily agree with it. Like you said, Lapeef, I feel like it interrupts with family structure a whole lot. I feel like it is being forced upon people that, and anytime you say anything to where you disagree with it, you're made out to seem like you're attacking, or you know, like you hate these people or you want to harm these people. But it's not that. We can get along. It's just that if you believe something, I have the right to not agree with you. And so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
I would say for me, again, I'm going to speak my mouth. Whereas I think a lot of times we are leaving school systems and the government to raise our children, when I think it's a personal responsibility. So for me, the thing is I don't agree. I'm gonna be clear with that. I don't agree with the push for everybody to accept and be on the same page and say this is okay, this is okay. I think each person has their individual right to determine what's going to be the best interest for their families and what they believe in. And that needs to be a private family matter. I don't like the push to make it a public thing and make it be like, well, everybody needs to be okay with this. I don't agree with that. However, I do think the onus on what occurs is really on how you run your household. So my son is young, he's in his young 20s. So he grew up in the era where all of this push for these things were normalized and it was okay as a society and we need to be accepting of everybody, this and that and the other, which is fine. I do believe you should accept everybody and treat everyone with respect, regardless of what their belief systems are across sex, gender, religion, political beliefs, or whatever. Everybody should have a general respect, period. But in my household, the influence that occurred outside that's pushing that agenda didn't affect my household. So that's the part that I think I'm more concerned about, is that people are getting up in arms about certain things that should be implemented in their home. Their values, their structure, their belief system, all of those things are presented to your children at home. And the government is not going to impact the way that I run my household. So the things that you can be in charge of and push forth is on you. So you can't blame the government for those things. I mean, I think it's a lack of parenting on our end. It really is a lack of parenting on our end. We dropped the ball as the previous generation on raising our children, and now we're putting off that responsibility onto the government or onto the school system. So that part right there for me is the issue. But yeah, I don't agree with it, but it's not going to impact my household directly because we raised our kids.
Go ahead,
Well,
Brittany.
it does.
Hold on. Let me
It
let
does.
you get to that. Go ahead, Brittany.
I don't agree with it. It definitely feels like an agenda, considering how it's in everything now. Kid shows, how in certain schools they're learning about it. When have we ever pushed the stance with heterosexual individuals? You know what I mean? It just feels like an agenda, and I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but I do agree with what Miss Taken said, that, you know, it doesn't really affect me because we teach our children what we want them to know. You know, we teach them about what's happening right now because they're being bombarded with it, regardless of what they see with us. They're being bombarded with a message. And so it's important for us to teach them, you know, what it is we want them to know. And hopefully, you know, as they mature and grow, they'll make a decision that doesn't necessarily align with the popular opinion, but what resonates with what, you know, we've instilled in them.
I just want you guys to understand too that you will never have full control over your child.
Yeah.
And if your child is not homeschooled, then they're at more of a risk when they go out into the world of being influenced. If they have access to a phone or a tablet or to a television, then they are at risk of being influenced. So it does matter as far as what we do, even though we're maintaining and we're giving instruction at home. If we have the opportunity and chance to be able to make a difference outside of it, then why not take advantage of it, right? So I think Hink was going to allude to that it is an influence, but I don't want to speak for you, Hink. So what were your thoughts about what Ms. Taken said in particular that you was going to respond to?
So Mistake said it doesn't influence how she moves, and that's not true. The government's always influenced you. You can't even correct your kids the way we used to correct back in the days. If you was to spank your kid now, if your child was to call 911, there will be a problem. If your kid sit there and said, "I want to change my sex," and go to school and let your teachers know, as you know, it will be a problem. They will consider that some sort of abuse in some sort of way. You can't, there's a lot of things we can't do that we used to do. If your kids would decide to go and pray in school, that will be looked upon, that will be a problem, there'll be an issue. If your kids wear your hair a certain way, maybe even for your religious reasons, that's a problem. The government said that's an issue. So we can't sit there and say, no, they don't have no influence. They do. Now, we may not want to think they do because we feel like, oh, no, they're going to tell. They do. It's just a way they do it. It's a subtle way they do it. And everybody, you know, does what they need to do. But go ahead, Mistaken.
This is the biggest thing that I see. I grew up in, and I know you're talking about current, but I'm gonna bring it back to past to bring it to current, right? I wholeheartedly agree with what JR said about there's influence that's going to occur outside the home. I act that 100%. I grew up in a very strict household in terms of like my parents were Christian. We grew up in church. We were in Bible study. We were in the choir. We were in church about 4 times out of 7-day week. Like that was how we grew up. But I lived in the hood, right? So that's why I always say I was in the hood, but not of the hood, because what occurred in my household was vastly different than what occurred outside of my home. And when I say which one actually had the bigger influence, it was inside my household. Even though I left and I went against some of the things that I was taught, I do believe that all people go through that. That's part of your development of trying to figure out who you are, things like that. So that's what happens. You know what I'm saying? That's what happens. And there were things that I did that I knew weren't in alignment with what I was taught. But because I was taught that, I had some measure to guide my moral compass, to guide my behavior. Even though I did some of the wrong things, it didn't sit right with me because I knew I was taught better than that. And that's the same thing. So the government can make all of the other thing is knowing the different laws in your state, right? And have communication with your kids. As an educator, the biggest issue that I see when I'm working with students is that parents don't know how to develop relationships with their children. They don't communicate. They don't have conversations. And when you look at the comparison, like how we were raised, it was don't ask questions, just do what you're told. So you left a big gap for for influences to come in. Because when I don't feel comfortable that I can come to you to ask you any question, then I'm going to seek answers for that elsewhere. So I started with my kids very young, conversations around sex, conversations around drugs, conversations around anything. And they will test you and see how you respond to those things. So we had conversations. They knew how we stood on it, but also was saying, we know you're going to make decisions that may go against what we say, but also be willing to deal with the consequences that come with those decisions. Till this day, my kids still come to us. So that's the part that's missing. I'm not saying that the government don't try to influence the way you raise your kids, but you can minimize the type of influence that they're going to have. So when they're having conversations in school, if you haven't did research or learned about the LGBTQ community to combat that in your household so you can speak from facts and understanding, yes, you're going to leave a bigger gap for them to be influenced. Again, I will always push it back to your family structure. If your family structure is not in place and solid, you're leaving a gap for other people to influence your beliefs and values as a family, period.